What's going on, guys? So now that I've become an officer officially, I thought it'd be a neat little idea to talk about, the training that an enlisted soldier gets and the training that an officer gets, and in what ways, whether enlisted is trained better or officers are trained better. I thought it might be a neat little idea to talk about that today. So what we're going to be talking about today is going to be geared more towards the basic training that you're going to be getting whether you're enlisted, or the basic training that you're going to be getting whether you're becoming an officer. So I'm not going to talk about, like AIT specific stuff or BOLIC specific stuff. The reason being is BOLIC, which is similar to the officer version of AIT, those are more going to be generally based upon your MOS, and so the training there could be really just depending on that specific experience that you're going to and the job that you're going to and everything. So what are the requirements to actually be a soldier, to actually be an officer, and who actually gets trained better? This is obviously going to be a subjective video based on my personal experience, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to divvy it up into several different categories. And the first thing I want to talk about is marksmanship, BRM, basic rifle marksmanship. So going to a range, make your ability to actually shoot 40 out of 40, your skills with an M4, actually being able to take it apart, put it back together, knowing what you should do, sports, everything encompassing your actual weapon, marksmanship training, right? Basic rifle marksmanship training. So whether you're enlisted or an officer, you're going to get trained on this. When you're going through white phase of basic training, most of that is going to be based on your marksmanship. And when you're going through training to become an officer, it's going to be kind of split up a little bit. You're going to have a little bit of training here, you're going to have a little bit of training there, but in a sense, you should get the same basic training that you get whenever you're at actual basic training. And I do want to preface here in this video that obviously I commissioned through ROTC. That is not the only way to commission through the Army. So OCS is another way that you can commission, but ROTC is the way that the military gets the majority of their officers. So if I talk about anything in this video, it is going to be related to my ROTC experience. So who gets the better training with the marksmanship training? And I would have to give that one to the enlisted soldiers. In general, from my experience, I have seen that enlisted soldiers they just shoot better at the range, basically because they get more hands-on experience at basic training with their weapons than officers do, than ROTC cadets get. One of the reasons that's difficult for ROTC cadets to get that experience with your rifles is you're always on like college campuses and stuff, and you can't have actual real weapons, and your school might be a little bit limited on a budget, so you may never even get to go to an actual range to shoot before your final summer training, which is now called advanced camp. So when you go to basic training, you're going to get a lot more experience with your weapon than officers will going through the whole ROTC process. The next biggie is going to be your battle drills, right? So these are some of the things that you're going to be doing during your FTXs at basic training. You're going to be out in the field. You're going to be basically, attacking a certain objective. So you're going to be doing all these different battle drills, whether it's battle drill 1 alpha, whether it's setting up an ambush, whether it is react to contact, or whatever these battle drills that we're talking about here. Who gets trained better whenever it comes to these things? And I would have to give this one to the officers, right? So a large portion of what officers go through in their training, especially in their 3rd year of officer training, which is their MS3 year, they're going to spend basically the whole entire year going over platoon operations, going over your battle drills, and actually being able to lead those things. You're going to be in a leadership position, and when you're in a leadership position, whenever you're doing these battle drills, you're going to learn it a lot better than whenever you have basic training. And it's more than likely that you're going to not be in a leadership position, and you're just going to be kind of going through the motions. So whenever I was at basic training, I was in leadership position. I was the platoon leader at basic training, and I remember doing these battle drills, and I remember the drill sergeants teaching us these battle drills. But what happens at basic training is a lot of times they'll just teach you something. They'll teach you it once, you take some notes on it, and then you try to just teach yourself. You might go through the motions a few times out, doing some trainings and stuff like that, and then you'll actually do it during your FTXs. But it's a little bit different because you don't actually know what's going on. Now, my prior experience being enlisted and actually going through these battle drills and having that basic training and AIT experience did help me whenever it came to me training to be an officer, because you're going to be going over this stuff again, but definitely in a lot more detail. Whenever you have basic training, it's going to be, you're just kind of going through the motions a little bit. You get a quick understanding of it. If you're an infantry soldier, you're obviously going to become more proficient at it, but in general, the basic training portion, officers, honestly, in my experience, we got trained a lot better than I thought on this aspect of training. Now when it comes to drill and ceremony, and this is like your marching movements, your facing movements, everything that encompasses drill and ceremony, this is a pretty easy one. Basic training soldiers and enlisted soldiers are definitely going to be a lot better at this whenever it comes to drill and ceremony than it comes to officers, right? Because just you don't do it as much whenever you're going through ROTC. You don't really do it as much as whenever you're at basic training. You're going to be marching everywhere all the time. You're going to be calling cadence. Your drill sergeants are going to be teaching you stuff. And from my experience going through ROTC and then seeing other cadets, not even just at my school, a lot of times people don't know certain things when it comes to drill and ceremony. And for me and some of the other prior enlisted soldiers who are going through ROTC, we're just kind of like, shaking our heads like, how in the world do you not know this? So it's really easy one. Drill and ceremony, if you're enlisted, you're definitely going to get a little bit better training on that. Now let's talk about some more little specific topics that you're going to be taught, whether it's first aid or land navigation. These are the two things that I want to focus on. And when you're enlisted versus officer, who gets trained better? Well, the difference here is when you're enlisted going through basic training, you're kind of going to be getting pushed through things, right? You're going to be taught land navigation. Either you get it or you don't. You're going to be taught first aid. Either you get it or you don't. And then during the actual portion of basic training, we're going to be tested on land navigation. And I don't even think we were ever tested on first aid. I don't think that was something that we did. We were just taught it, but never actually tested on it. With ROTC, you're actually tested on land nav, and you're actually tested on your first aid skills individually. When it comes to basic training, the land nav portion, you're gonna be doing that in a group, and you have to pass that in a group of like 3 or 4. So you personally don't even have to be proficient at land nav to make it through basic training, although I do recommend it. I have a pretty good video. It's like an hour long that teaches you guys everything that you need to know about land navigation to pass basic training, so I suggest that if you guys don't know what the heck you're doing whenever it comes to this land nav stuff. But when it comes to being taught specific things like this, the officers, I would have to give it to them. I think the officers, are going to be getting better trained on these specific topics, basically because in all of these different areas, officers are going to be tested on it, and they're going to be tested on it multiple times. And the final summer training that ROTC cadets are going to go to before they commission as an officer, they're going to have to be tested on these things individually, and if you don't know it, you could potentially just not become an officer. Whenever it comes to basic training, they might just push you through, and you might not have to be as proficient at these things. On the officer side, you've got to get this stuff down pat, so definitely going to give this to the officer. Now I'm going to talk a little bit in general terms here whenever it comes to enlisted versus officers and the whole training and stuff that you get. And from my experience, what I noticed whenever I was going through these things, going through, training to become an officer, there were a few things that we didn't do that much of, right? So drags and carries and things like that, we didn't really do that much of it, right? So when you're at basic training, you're going to be there for 9 weeks and 4 days. You're going to be doing this stuff all the time. When you're training to become an officer through ROTC, all this stuff is basically going to be split up over 2 years. And then your last 2 years of ROTC is going to be where you learn all the leadership stuff, right? So as far as leadership roles, officers are obviously going to be better because that is what they are supposed to do. Enlisted soldiers and officers do not have the same role in the military. So obviously the training is going to be a little bit different. But I wanted to talk about some of the basic knowledges, that you're going to have to learn to be in the military, in the Army specifically. But, I just got to hand it to my other now fellow officers. Honestly, coming from enlisted, going through the whole transition to become an officer, I really didn't expect to get trained as well I was going to be trained, right? I did not expect, the amount of things I was going to have to learn. I did not expect, really how difficult it is to be a second lieutenant. Obviously, I just started, but there's so much to learn. There's so much that, we were taught as far as how to be a leader, because that's really a huge part of ROTC. That's a huge part of becoming an officer, is you are being taught how to be a leader. Whereas the basic training portion, we didn't really get taught that. I got a few things, I got a few tips because I was a platoon leader whenever I was at basic training, but I was just trying to be the best leader that I could. I wasn't actually taught how to be a leader. So as far as officers goes, that's just something that I did not expect. We were trained, at least from my school and my experience, we were trained far better than I ever thought I was going to be trained, so I'm really pumped for that. I'm excited. Obviously, I'm going to have a lot of things to learn, but the real question that you guys might be asking me, you're wondering probably right now, is just in general, who is actually trained better, enlisted soldiers or officers? And that's a little bit difficult to answer. I would say, the nitty gritty, the details, the soldiery stuff that you have to do, the things that aren't really leadership roles, you're probably going to be trained a little bit better whenever you're enlisted, because that's kind of your role. But the officer side of things, the leadership side of things, the leadership roles and your battle drills, you're going to be taught that as an officer really well. So obviously officers in the military are supposed to be held to a higher standard. So I mean, it's totally, I guess, biased, or maybe it's not biased because I used to be enlisted, but you know, I would have to give the training as a whole better to the officers than the enlisted soldiers. But there are some things that officers obviously aren't gonna have that experience. The, you know, discipline, or the understanding of the rank structure that I talked about before. You know, whenever you're enlisted and you enter the military as a private, whenever you look at an officer, you look at them so differently than whenever you're just a cadet going through ROTC and you're looking at an officer. They're just, you know, they're not like a peer, but they're not as intimidating. But when you go to basic training, whenever you see your company commander, it's like, they're just like, oh my gosh. But when you're going through ROTC, when you're a cadet and you see a captain, it's not as big of a deal. So there are some things that are gonna be lacking just because of the environment that you're being trained in. Well, that's it for this video. I hope you guys did enjoy. I'm not really sure how I was gonna go, but you know, I just kind of went for it. You know, what's better, officer versus enlisted? So I hope you guys did enjoy it. And if you did, hit that like button. That would be awesome. If you want to stick around some more of my videos, hit the subscribe button. That would be even better. If you guys are not following me on Instagram and Snapchat, social media links are right here. And I haven't mentioned this in a while, but you know, these Jim Fidel shirts, the ones that I'm sponsored by, this is actually like my favorite shirt, the blood red one. So if you guys want this, if you're interested in it, link is in the description. I hope you guys have an amazing day, and I will see you later.